Greg. How you going, mate?
Oh, real good. Nice to talk to you.
Mate, unprecedented times with the Olympics being pushed back and all the restrictions around training, and depending on where you live in the world, depends on what those restrictions are. If Tokyo does go ahead next year, what do you think are some of the keys to ensuring that athletes are going to be both physically and mentally ready to go in a year's time?
I think staying healthy is going to be really key. And I don't know what your situation is like there, but ours is so different from one locale to another. So it's going to depend on how each locale approaches training when you do have problems, because it doesn't look like, for us anyway, that the virus is going away anytime soon. So how we use the next 12 months is probably key. We were fortunate with our group. We haven't been out of the water too much, so I think we're aerobically fairly fit. But we've got to keep everyone healthy and hopefully have pool time. Right now, one of our biggest problems has been finding pool time.
Hey, what did you learn from working with the Thai team and coming out this way and working with Bill Sweetenham and getting to talk to different Aussie coaches? Did that help shape your coaching philosophies?
Oh, without a doubt. First of all, I realized how lucky we were to have the facilities we did. Because the Thais, we spent some time in Bangkok and then spent some time in Singapore and Hong Kong. Met a lot of coaches, so I was able to blend a lot of things that every time. I think that the coaching community is so willing to give, and everyone has something to offer. So every time I heard a good idea and something that caught my attention, I try to bring it back and see if I could modify it to make it even better or make it fit the situation we were in. And you can't be around a guy like Bill Sweetenham and not understand. He gives you a greater understanding of what it takes to really perform at the highest levels. And at the same time, I had the good fortune I worked with Anthony Nesty. He was from Suriname and came to Bulls. And I got to know his coach, Kenneth McDonald, there. The blending of all those different philosophies allowed me to look at a lot of different ways to do it. But Bill, the absolute best and the most articulate about what it takes to get to the highest level. And I guess the things I most learned from Bill is a little of that you're not going to get very far if you compromise. And at the same time, got to meet a lot of Australian coaches. I'm pretty good friends with Dennis Cottrell. And Dennis always had a unique approach to training and very, very sharing. Michael's the same way. So I think those things all together allowed me to blend a style that worked for me. And it also showed me there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat.
Man, I mentioned a bit earlier some out-and-out superstars you have developed and worked with, and none more so, I think, than Ryan Lochte. 4 Olympic Games, world records, and 12 Olympic medals. Phenomenal athlete, no doubt. Give us a snapshot into working with one of the greatest of all time in our sport.
He had a tremendous background. His father had been his age group and his high school coach. And when he came to school, he was labeled a little bit as a talented guy, but he only had in November of his senior year, he only had one senior national standard. It was the 1,500 meters or 1650 freestyle, the mile. Now, he made a couple more in the state meet after that. But when he came in his freshman year, he was a handful. Great job training, always good at the pool, but a little bit of a handful away from the pool. So, and his sophomore year, he was I'd say he was a little more rebellious, was questioning why he was doing so much work. And his father and I talked, and his father was pretty instrumental. He talked to Ryan, and we had a conversation about it and said, you just got to stay the course. This is where we're at. And Dad was really good about pressing him, and it was a key time in his career because what it did between his father and I, he bought into what he was doing. And once he was 100% in, he just kept getting better the whole time. And it became, we worked together almost 11 years the first time around. And then he left for a few years. But those 11 years, the first 8 of them, he was the perfect athlete to deal with at the pool. You got exactly what you asked for. And I guess the most unique thing is we had a good college team at that time. And his freshman year, he was one of the guys in the team, but by his sophomore year and certainly his junior year, he had evolved to where he was by far the fastest guy. And the entire time he liked to race at practice. we got into the second or third year there, and I noticed he was no longer leading practice. And then versus saying anything to him, we just spent a little bit of time and watched. He'd found a way to kind of amuse himself at practice where he liked to race. And what he was doing, he was taking the set we set up, and he would intentionally go 5, 3, 8 seconds back and create race dynamics in practice. And in his idea, he liked to race. That was the reason why he was in the sport, and that made practice more meaningful for him by taking the time to. And then we started talking about it, and it became one. And then our goal was to see how far back we could be and still catch up people, and pick out new challenges. And we would do things like spend a certain amount of time with the breaststrokers to improve our breaststroke leg of the medley, or a certain amount of time with backstrokers. And it became an exchange. I think there was a good learning experience for me because you realize how important the athlete's attitude towards training is. And at the same time, the communication and the trust built up between the two of us became really important for success.
Mate, no doubt Ryan had a great friendship with Michael Phelps, and come race day, obviously those boys were fierce competitors. What was it like on some of those training camps with the US team when they would be training together in the same pool? Do you have any good stories around that? Because I know Bob, I spoke to Bob the other day, and he was mentioning that there was quite some interesting training sessions.
I think before Beijing, in our camp in 2000, we came off the trials, and they both swam really well. And they both swim in similar programs. And Bob and I, the first few days at camp, everyone's just kind of getting together. And then after that, we started knocking heads with one another. And it must have been maybe 3-4 days into it. Those two guys are going at one another, and Bob and I were talking, and we decided we better separate them before they killed one another. Because if they were going the way they were going, they would have been dead meat by the time we got to the meet. So we would, at that point, we would kind of move them in and out enough to see one another and get a little taste of racing one another, but not so much that they were just going battling heads every day for 3-4 weeks going into camp. So it served a really great purpose the first week, 10 days. And then it was good the next 2 weeks, just a little bit here and there. But we had to be a little cautious and not put them head to head all the time.
All right, I want to talk highlights in your career now. I know this won't be easy given the phenomenal success you've experienced, 68 Olympians, you've been in the game for a minute, so there's no doubt you've experienced a lot of highs, but surely you must have a few that stick out as moments in time that you're super proud of.
I was asked this question in 12. And before we go any further, I've been fortunate to have a good career, but I've always been blessed with a lot of really good people to work with. Yep. Martin Welby, who's the head coach in Canada now. Martin worked with me for 18 years, and he was tremendous. I had really good assistant, Larry Schoaf at Bowles. Fantastic. And having good people that you work with like that makes your job easier. And if you have really good athletes, so sometimes we get a lot of praise because of the people around us. And I think relying on those people and taking their judgment is really key. Key things. The one that stands out to me is our first day at the 2012 Olympic trials in the United States. We put 4 people on the U.S. team that first day. Ryan obviously made the 400 IM. Elizabeth won the 400 IM. Connor Dwyer made the 400 free, and Peter Vanderkam made the 400 free. And that was really big. The first day of the competition, and we stood up really big. And we were good the entire meet, but that day will always stick in my mind. But it's coupled with the first day of the Olympics in 2012. The U.S. team is, you come off that trials and you're getting ready, and we hadn't been especially good. And everyone was, we were wondering whether we were going to be any good in 12. And we're swimming the first day, and I got those same 4 people going. And at the same time, I'm the head men's coach. So I felt in that dynamic, you always feel responsibility as a coach when you're working with your own athlete. You haven't even, sometimes I think you feel a greater responsibility when you're working with someone else's athlete. You're caretaking. Mm-hmm. You're trying to make sure that you don't mess up someone else's good work. And then at the same time, if you're in charge of your country's team, that's a real power pack situation. And those same 4 athletes all stood up big and all went faster the first day at the trials. And we didn't see coming out of the trials, we didn't see how we were going to medal in the 400 free, and we went third and fourth. Both of them had big drops, both Connor Dwyer and Peter Vanderkay to get things started. Ryan swims faster in the 400 IM. He wins the 400 IM and swims faster than he did at the trials. And then Elizabeth comes back and tremendous 400 IM. We handled a disappointing second place finish in a unique dynamic with a whole lot of class. I think that's probably as proud as I've ever been of a group of athletes. And then I turned back at the same time on the other end of my career, maybe my second year in Fort Myers. I had a lot of no-name athletes that no one knew who they were. We were at a little high school that had never had any success. And winning the conference meet that year for them was really something that I always remember, because it was a lot of kids that no one had any confidence in. One kid's dad was a shrimper and he couldn't get to practice. Another kid was this big old long-haired kid that everyone thought he couldn't swim. And we won the men's conference championship with a lot of guys. It's like, who were those guys? And all the big names with the other schools, and we just flat out trained them. And that ingrained in me a belief that you could accomplish anything if you believed in yourself and you really were going to work hard at it. So I think those two bookend things stand out. And then the other one I tell people, oddly enough, certainly having people break world records and people win medals and things, those are always high points. But I think the more important thing, and sometimes we miss in the sport, is what tremendous people our sport produces. And when you get that phone call or that email from a kid that swam for you 10, 15, 20, I'm getting to the point where it's 30, 40 years ago. And maybe at the time they didn't appreciate it, but they come back and they appreciate the work ethic and the things they learned from the sport and how it's helped made them successful. You realize then that by not compromising and challenging them, you were impacting their future and their impact on the world. And that's something that's generational. You can never replace that.
Now, mate, you were head coach of the University of Florida in Gainesville from 1998 until a few years ago. You had tremendous success there until you decided to step back and coach a smaller elite squad. For all the Aussie listeners out there who may not know how much is involved in college coaching, how much did you enjoy it? How time-consuming was it? And how different was it from being a club coach?
In my day, I was at Florida for 20 years, and exactly 20. I started in May of 98, and I retired from college coaching in May of 18. The job kept getting bigger. When I came in, I left Bowles because it was a club team of 350, and we had 10 coaches and all kinds of, plus some part-time people, and the way it was set up in the States, you're negotiating all that, and it was an awful lot. So I came to Florida to coach just women. I'd had a lot of success with the women at Bowles, and I coaching just a women's team, and I really liked that dynamic of working with a smaller group. And after the year there, the athletic director asked that we put the two programs together, and I took on both of them. In that dynamic, you've got somewhere between 25 and 35 women, and you have somewhere between 25 and 35 men. So you got 70, and they're pretty high quality athletes, and you've recruited them to come to school. So they've got some ability. If you're going to have any sort of success at all, you've got an international group on top of that. And we had as many as 22 in Olympic years, 22 people in addition to those people training. You've got, so you're working with about 70 to 80 athletes that you're directly responsible for. And you have a staff of somewhere between 6 and 8 coaches that are working with them. And I've always felt that good coaches, and you've got to give those guys leeway to coach, but at the same time, I've always felt that responsible what the athletes are doing. So you got to know what's going on. And you're trying to get all those parts to work. At the same time, you're recruiting the next group of people coming in, and you got a group of people graduating and going out. All of us in coaching sometimes, I think, probably good for age group coaches. We always kind of view the parent as an enemy. and they kind of, we all feel that way sometimes because they can get in the way. But when you're a head college coach, you start to realize what the parent does that when you're working with high school age athletes that you don't understand. When you're the college coach, if they get in trouble in the classroom, it ends up in your desk. If they get in trouble on Saturday night out and have a beer too many at a party or something, it's going to end up in your desk on Monday morning. Mm-hmm. If they're having a fight with their girlfriend or their boyfriend, especially if they're on the team, it's going to end up in your desk in some manner. You're consulting in those areas. You've got to be constantly aware of your graduation rates because that's what your athletic directors want. You recruit athletes, and in my dynamic, we recruit athletes that were very good international swimmers and long course swimmers, but at the same time, you have a short course dynamic. You're always treading that line of which athletes should put the focus on short course and which ones put the focus on long course. Elizabeth Beisel probably gave up a couple NC2A championships because, for all practical purposes, we were. I wouldn't say we were training through the NC2A meet, but it certainly wasn't our goal point. It was someplace where you stop along the way. And one year she's fourth at the NC2As, but she also wins the World Championships that summer. She won the World Championship because we were fourth at the NC2A meet. So you got all those things going on, and you have lots of bosses. You got an athletic director. You've got trainers that are extremely powerful in the American collegiate situation. If they say an athlete is sick, they're sick. And as they should be. They're doing their job. It's no criticism. But you've got trainers. You've got academic advisors. You're still dealing with some of the parents from afar. So it's just a tremendous stress. And I came to the realization my last 6-7 years of doing it that it's especially important. Your staff has to be very, very tight and got to all be working on the same page because you've got all those moving parts. And at the same time, it's get all those pieces to fit is hard, and performance at the highest level can get away from you so easily. So with all those moving parts, it's a full-time job, and it takes its toll on you. And I started to realize that if a guy like Caleb Dressel was going to be successful at the Olympics in 2020, it was going to take something. It was going to take something really special, and there wasn't going to be much room for error. And then I think we solved that. So the smaller, maybe a chance of flexibility to work with those things. By the same token, the team dynamic in an American collegiate situation, great. Helps you motivate people, helps get them going. Training is a dynamic situation. You love getting to practice, but sometimes you're going to be encompassed with things that have nothing to do with practice. And it makes it really hard.
Now, I mentioned earlier the Ryan Lochte documentary, and obviously I want to turn my attention now onto a man who very well may have his own documentary made in the future, and that's Caleb Dressel. He's the premier swimmer right now in the world, possibly the biggest name and brand in swimming right now, along with Adam Peaty, Katie Ledecky, and Simone Manuel. What's it like coaching and mentoring an athlete that not just the US, but the world expects a lot from? And did working with Ryan help prepare you a little bit more for what was to come when Caleb came around?
Without a doubt, working with Ryan helped, because Ryan taught me a lot about versatility. And the nice thing about Caleb, when Caleb came to school, he had all kinds of options. And we had a long discussion about whether he wanted to be the best swimmer he could possibly be or just the best sprinter he could possibly be. And he was pretty adamant he wanted to be the best swimmer possible. It's unfortunate that it doesn't fit in the program. His 100 breaststroke and his 200 IM when he broke the American record short course, he's capable of those, close to those type of performances long course, but we just can't get everything to fit together. There's too much. And he's so dependent on those relay swims. But watching him mature over the past 6 years, and he gets a better feel for where he's at, and understanding what he feels important, and taking the information he gives you and molding that. I think it's been a really unique experience. And Ryan's helped him immensely. When those two guys are together, Ryan helps him a lot because Caleb respects Ryan's experience. And Ryan, like I said before, is very good at sharing stuff. They're both really good for one another.
And I feel like of anyone I can speak to on the podcast, you will be best equipped to answer this question given your success over many years. What makes a superstar swimmer, do you think? Like Caleb Dressel, like a Ryan Lochte? Is it something that, can be taught? Is it something that, is ultimately just in their makeup? I know I watched the Michael Jordan documentary, and I know you would have as well, just how fierce of a competitor he was. Do you think people can reach that level just with dedication and hard work and a burning desire to be the best, or is it something that just comes naturally to them?
I don't know that you have it or you don't. I do know that that it's a combination of lots of factors. What's that old saying? It doesn't. Everyone likes to win, but they got to hate losing. Caleb Dressel and Ryan Lochte hate losing. They Michael Phelps, they hate losing. Michael Jordan, he hates losing. I was a student of some other sports, great football coach like Vince Lombardi, hate losing. Ferguson hates losing. Those guys learn how to motivate those things in the right direction. I think there's something to be said for that, and they're not afraid to step out. And what's really unique, the most unique thing I've seen about Ryan and Caleb, they're never satisfied. Now, getting them to understand it on a day-to-day basis, practice isn't always easy, but they're never satisfied at the competition. As good as Korea was for Caleb, we left with a whole list of things that and his was longer than mine, that we weren't happy about.
Yeah,
that we thought could be even. But I think the key is it's easy to recognize those things in meet days. Can you take those things and put them into practice on the really challenging days and make it happen then? That's important. And I think those really good guys find a way to do that. And they do understand there is no fear. What's that? Michael Jordan, he talks about all the game-winning shots he took, but he wasn't afraid to take one, and they shot just as many that didn't win games, and shot more shots that didn't make it than ones that did. But he wasn't afraid to take that next shot. And I find that a lot for those really good guys. They're looking for ways to take another shot. Give me another opportunity.
I asked Bob Bowman this a few weeks ago when he came on, and I'll throw it out to you as well. How proud are you of the relationships and bonds you've formed with your athletes, both past and present? I mean, the results are great and they've been, astronomical in terms of your own career, but how important are the friendships you've formed and the teams of men and women you've helped mentor into successful lives and careers?
They're really important. and they're the thing, stand on the podium and winning is great. But the things you learn in getting there, they're generational. They pass on from generation to generation. And you look at today's crazy world, we need leaders and we need people that can handle adverse situations and can function well in those adverse situations. Being able to contribute to that is really important. And I found that until he retired, I bought my car from a guy that swam for me for over 20 years. I have just unbelievable numbers of phone calls and things that I got when everything was shut down. Guys that understood the passion for the sport. And then there are guys that swam a long time ago, but they understood the sport and they understood what was happening and how's everyone going to handle all this. So that concern for one another, those things are really big. Christmas cards. I've got a couple girls that swam for me. Their parents send me every year pictures of the girls and the family and their vacation every year and things. Those type of things are unbelievably important. Gemma Spofford, right now, I just spoke with her the other night. She's 8 months pregnant, getting ready to deliver twins. Fantastic having a chance to touch base and talk with her. So, and it's not always just the great athletes. It's the ones that sometimes some of your best athletes and the people that help those great athletes are the ones that didn't quite have the skill set to put them. They were missing some ingredient in there, but their work ethic, they were part of what happened. And I always tried to sell the team on when someone from our group does successful, we're all sharing in that. And that goes for me too. when those people go on and be successful in life and they have families and things, I get to share in those things. And, there's some that don't appreciate it, but sometimes there's a lot of it come back afterwards and they have a little time to reflect on it. They appreciate it a lot more then.
Now, before we get on to some less serious questions, mate, if there's any young coaches listening out there, what is some advice around, building a successful legacy and program like you have?
I think the first thing you got to be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. A little bit of impatience isn't bad. Don't misunderstand me. You got to be pressing the issue, and you can't just accept things for the way they are. But you also have to be patient because I always tell people that swimming's like a fine bottle of wine. You open it too soon and it's not very good. and so you got to take your time working with it. That's one. And I was told by an older coach, and I don't even remember who it was, to tell you the truth, when I was earlier, stay the same place for a long time. The grass is always greener on the other side, but make the grass where you're at green. And the longer you stay in one place, the more you become an expert within that environment, and then you meet a little less resistance. So I've only had 3 jobs, 1 for 5 years and 2 for 20 plus. So I think that's that type of thing is good. I think you've got to, and maybe even more so than ever before, you can't let the sport consume you. It has to be important. It has to be a priority, but it can be very consuming. And if you become too one-sided and too consumed by it, then you've got to understand the other things that are going on in life. I felt I became a better coach when when my own sons were all competitive athletes, and they all competed at relatively high levels within their sport. When I understood what they were facing at home, it gave me a much better idea of what I could do on my end that made those things better. So I think if you can get a greater insight into what your athlete is like away from the pool, it probably helps you help them be successful.
What about, mate, you've obviously traveled, you and the wife. What are some of your favorite countries you visited?
Oh, I love Australia. And this isn't just because I'm talking to you. I mean,
yeah.
I love Australia. I love New Zealand. Both those places are just fantastic. And I think the overriding reason I don't think I've ever been a place where people are as friendly as what they are in Australia. Just great time. You can walk in the bar and sit up and have a beer and have a bitters and no problem. I like it.
Well, I think also, mate, just the way you are, and I remember at that ASCA conference, I had a brief chat with you. You won't remember this, but I had a brief chat with you. So I think just, the sort of person that you are, and you're humble, you're down to earth, you've got a good sense of humor. I think you would fit in over here very easily.
I've always, my wife and I said, she likes Australia too. She's loved it when we've been there. So it's always been good.
Speaking of pubs,
time to a little better when we get back.
Absolutely, mate. Speaking of pubs, if we were at the pub and I was going to shout you a drink, I was going up to the bar, what would I be getting you?
Which point in my career? I've done around all of them, and I'm not always proud to say, but every once in a while I've done each one of them too much one time, so I moved on to something else. I guess my favorite drink would probably be a really good scotch. Just over the rocks, just nice, good sipping scotch. That'd probably be my favorite drink.
Perfect. I think I could get amongst that as well. Now, mate, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to speak with you and go through your unbelievable career so far, and still has a few years to go. Absolutely. On behalf of the world of swimming, mate, I want to thank you and your contributions to the sport. And without a question, your coaching career will go down as one of the best of all time. And I dare say if we put your coaching career up against some of the other sports as well, you'd come out at the top. And I know you're not going to say that. You're very humble. And I get the sense through this conversation that, that sort of praise doesn't come easily to you. But I think that's a testament to your humble nature.
You've had too many of those scotches, obviously.
No, it's in the morning. I told you I've had coffee.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate the kind words, and it's been really great talking to you.
Mate, stay safe over there.
What you're doing. the tremendous service for the sport.
Thank you. Well, it's as I said, it's a pleasure for me to be able to just sit and talk to you. And I'm a coach as well myself, mate. So a lot of this is professional development. I can go back and have a look at my own program with some of the things that, I've spoken to Bob and now speak to yourself, and I've spoken to a few Aussie coaches as well. So it's a great opportunity for me, and it's a credit to you guys in donating your time back to the sport. And you mentioned it before. I think that's something that swimming does really well, is always being open to helping others.
Well, you see my Aussie friends coaching over there. Please tell them I said hello, and it's been really great talking to you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, mate. Thank you very much. Stay safe over there. Continue success with your athletes getting back in the pool and heading towards 2021. And hopefully, mate, we can stay in touch and maybe next year get you on for another chat. But till then, thank you very much for coming on Off the Block Swimming Podcast.
Sounds good, Robbie. Take care.
Today's episode of Off the Block Swimming Podcast is proudly brought to you by Pro Swim Workouts.